on trial, which ended in a mistrial after a hung jury. And despite facing 2 charges of capital murder, the defense is still pushing for bond and offering a number of compromises if the judge allows it.
YNW Melly's double murder trial just hit a shocking breaking point. The rapper, whose real name is Jamel Demons, collapsed in court after his longtime friend YNW Bortland flipped on him and took the stand. This moment of betrayal has everyone talking, as it could completely change the outcome of the case. Melly is accused of being involved in the 2018 deaths of Anthony Williams, known as YNW Sack Chaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., known as YNW Juvie.
I'm going to sentence you to 10 years in Florida State Prison. That will be followed by 6 years of reporting probation. And the unlawful use of a two-way communication device, that's a second-degree felony, the maximum.
Prosecutors claim Melly and Bortland staged the whole scene to look like a drive-by, but in reality, they say it all happened inside a Jeep. The trial has become one of the most high-profile cases in hip-hop history, packed with surveillance footage, cell phone records, ballistics evidence, and shocking insider testimony. Prosecutors argue Melly's motive came from group tensions and money issues, while Bortland allegedly helped cover everything up. But Melly's defense insists this was no setup. They say it was a random drive-by carried out by unknown attackers. This clash of stories has created explosive courtroom battles. And when Bortland's cooperation was revealed in 2023, the trial reached a whole new level of drama. Cortland Henry, better known as YNW Bortland, was first charged as an accessory, but everything changed when he cut a deal and became the state's star witness. His testimony became the turning point prosecutors needed, aiming to directly tie YNW Melly to the tragic shootings.
So, Mr. Henry, what it's going to be is 2 counts of accessory after the fact, tampering with a witness in a capital felony, and unlawful use of a two-way communication device.
The state used Bortland's inside knowledge to shut down the defense's claim of a random drive-by, instead painting it as betrayal from within the YNW crew itself. Until that moment, Melly had stayed composed in court. But eyewitnesses say when Bortland began testifying, Melly grew tense, whispering to his lawyers before slumping forward as if the weight of it all crushed him. Reporters described it as a shocking collapse in front of everyone. To understand why this moment shook the courtroom, you gotta know the history between the two. Melly and Bortland weren't just friends, they were like brothers. Both helped build the YNW Collective from Gifford, Florida, presenting themselves as family bound by loyalty and music. When Melly's breakout single Murder on My Mind blew up, Bortland was right there, in videos, on tours, everywhere. That image of unity shattered when Bortland flipped and sided with the state. His testimony was devastating, describing the night of the shootings in detail, even saying Melly was the one who allegedly fired from inside the Jeep. Forensics had already confirmed the shots came from within, not outside. Forensic reports placed YNW Melly in the rear left seat of the Jeep, and when YNW Bortland's testimony matched that evidence, the defense's story started to crumble. Courtroom witnesses said Melly dropped his head, hands covering his face, while deputies stood ready in case things got out of control. The clip of that moment spread everywhere online, making it look like Melly was watching his future collapse right in front of him. Prosecutors had a clear strategy. They knew forensic data alone might leave room for doubt, but pairing it with Bortland's inside account gave them a powerful narrative. Legal experts say testimony from someone directly involved can be incredibly persuasive when it lines up with physical evidence. The defense fought back hard, arguing that Bortland only testified to save himself with a lighter sentence. During cross-examination, they grilled him on past statements and possible lies. But according to courtroom observers, Bortland stayed calm, repeating his claims with confidence.
Being accused of lying to the police for the person to see the situation as one where they're legally. I submit to the court on totality circumstances. They would not.
This clash created one of the trial's most dramatic moments. The prosecution managed to pit Melly and Bortland against each other, 2 men once seen as brothers, and that collapse in the courtroom became the ultimate symbol of broken loyalty. Media outlets ran with it, amplifying the drama even more. The moment Bortland testified was framed as the ultimate betrayal, and Melly's visible breakdown only fueled the drama. Local coverage noted how the courtroom atmosphere instantly shifted, with some commentators saying his reaction could sway jurors by showing just how heavy those words hit him. Experts warn that body language isn't evidence, but juries can't ignore it. And when paired with the chain of hard evidence, the impact became explosive. Investigators had already collected surveillance footage from studios and nearby businesses showing Melly with the victims just hours before the tragedy.
The defendant is in a room. He is confronted by the police that they don't believe what he's telling them. So he's lying to them, they have to come clean. And then he's not Mirandized. He's surrounded by a bunch of police. He goes to the bathroom. He has policemen bringing him to the bathroom. He's in a room where
Phone records then placed his device in contact with Bortland around the same time the Jeep was discovered full of bullet holes. The defense's drive-by theory quickly started to unravel, especially when investigators found the bullet trajectories didn't match the angle of a shooting from outside the car.
In other words, the deal you've negotiated is the deal you've negotiated. And that's the dog. You understand all that, sir?
Forensic experts confirmed what prosecutors had been pushing all along. The victims were shot from inside the Jeep at close range. This matched perfectly with YNW Bortland's testimony, where he claimed Melly was the one who pulled the trigger. When these findings hit the courtroom, witnesses say Melly looked shaken, constantly turning to his lawyers as the evidence stacked against him.
The hospital was a crime scene. There were officers there, crime scene was there, they were processing the vehicle, they were processing the deceased, they were processing for evidence, potentially evidence physically located on Mr. Henry as a victim.
What made the moment even more powerful was the emotional weight. Melly had always referred to Bortland as a brother, praising his loyalty during YNW's rise to fame. So when Bortland sat in that courtroom and described him as the shooter, the betrayal felt like a family fracture. Analysts pointed out that jurors often find testimony more believable when it comes from someone who once stood beside the accused.
That count is going to be an adjudication of 5 years in Florida State Prison. So the 2 accessory counts as well as the tampering count, those come with 6 years of reporting probation after the Department of Corrections sentence.
The emotional tension spilled over into the audience too. Family, reporters, and supporters reacted instantly. Some gasped, others whispered, while Melly's mother was visibly distressed as cameras captured every reaction. Seeing her son collapse under testimony from someone who was once family added another layer of heartbreak to the case. Prosecutors leaned on that moment hard, framing it as the ultimate betrayal and using it to drive their argument straight home. This moment marked a major turning point in the trial. It wasn't just about forensic reports anymore. It became a showdown between 2 men who once called each other brothers. For the jury, the image of YNW Melly collapsing as Bortland testified may stick in their minds just as much as the phone records or ballistic evidence. Courtroom psychology played a huge role as the day closed out. Experts say jurors are often swayed by images of despair or guilt, and Melly's collapse gave the prosecution exactly that moment. Reporters rushed out headlines within minutes, framing the case not around ballistics or forensics, but around the image of Melly folding under the words of someone he once called a brother. That collapse wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. Prosecutors used it to show how loyalty had shattered, tying the betrayal to hard science and painting a narrative the defense struggled to fight. By the next morning, public discussion focused less on technical details and more on the betrayal saga between Melly and Bortland. Analysts even compared it to past high-profile cases where insiders turned on co-defendants, noting jurors often find such testimony persuasive when it lines up with forensic evidence. Prosecutors wasted no time reminding the jury that ballistic experts had already proven the drive-by theory didn't add up, making Bortland's testimony hit even harder. Experts testified that bullet patterns showed shots came from the left rear passenger seat, the spot where Melly was sitting. Cell tower records also tracked his phone before, during, and after the shootings, including when Bortland drove the victims to the hospital. Prosecutors hammered these details as proof that the science lined up perfectly with Bortland's testimony. Melly's defense hit back hard, calling Bortland a self-serving witness, only testifying to save himself. They pointed out how his early police interviews described a drive-by, saying his story kept changing. To back this up, they brought in their own expert who suggested other possibilities, like ricochets. But prosecutors quickly broke that down, stressing the evidence still overwhelmingly pointed to shots fired from inside the Jeep. The defense stressed that no DNA or fingerprints tied Melly directly to the weapon, calling Bortland's testimony circumstantial. They argued the state had no hard proof linking him to the shots, but prosecutors fired back, saying a chaotic crime scene doesn't always leave clean evidence, and reminded jurors that the wounds and ballistic patterns still matched their case. Jurors heard Bortland admit he was present but still named Melly as the shooter. The pressure clearly showed. Courtroom sketches captured Melly slumped, covering his face while his mother broke down in tears. Headlines painted the testimony as devastating, with viral clips of his collapse blowing up on social media. Prosecutors used it to frame him as guilty or unstable. While the defense argued he was being unfairly targeted because of his fame and even his lyrics, the defense argued it was unfair to use Melly's lyrics, stressing that rap is art, not confession. But the judge still allowed limited references, saying they showed mindset, not guilt. Prosecutors then doubled down, bringing in YNW associates and text messages about money, loyalty, and tensions. Details that lined up with Bortland's story. Outside the courthouse, crowds split in two, supporters wearing YNW gear and protesters demanding justice for sack chaser and juvie, turning the trial into a cultural battle. Prosecutors focused on boosting Bortland's credibility, stressing that even with a plea deal, his testimony put him at risk. They argued no one would make up such a story knowing the backlash it could bring. Instead, they framed him as a reluctant but truthful witness. Experts noted that jurors often see hesitant testimony as more believable than someone eager to take the stand. Even as experts returned to technical details, the image of Melly collapsing under Bortland's words stayed front and center. Reporters mentioned it in daily recaps, keeping the betrayal narrative alive. The defense fought back with mistrial motions and appeals, but each was denied. Meanwhile, Melly's health seemed to decline. Reports noted weight loss, fatigue, and blank stares in court. Commentators compared his case to other artists betrayed by their inner circle, framing it as fame colliding with loyalty. The trial's second phase ended with prosecutors in control. Their betrayal narrative had stuck. The unforgettable image of Melly collapsing as Bortland testified became the symbol of the case, shaping how jurors and the public saw everything after. Prosecutors hammered home that the science already matched Bortland's account. Ballistics proved shots came from inside the Jeep, and phone records showed Melly and Bortland in constant contact before and after the incident. For the state, betrayal and evidence now walked hand in hand. Prosecutors told jurors the evidence was airtight. The cell phone data and ballistics backed up Bortland's story perfectly. The defense fired back, attacking his credibility and reminding everyone of his plea deal and changing statements. They argued that without direct physical proof linking Melly to the weapon, the entire case rested on betrayal from someone just trying to save himself. By the final phase, prosecutors had built a tight narrative. Henry's testimony lined up with forensics, surveillance, and phone records. The defense tried to poke holes, but reporters said it looked like an uphill battle. Prosecutors kept stressing loyalty shattered and brotherhood betrayed, while the judge reminded jurors to focus only on evidence. Still, the emotional image of Melly's collapse lingered. Outside court, debate raged across podcasts and social media, turning the trial into a cultural flashpoint. Last-minute defense motions for mistrial were quickly denied. In closing arguments, prosecutors laid it all out. Forensics first, digital evidence second, and Bortland's testimony as the emotional anchor. They even replayed the clip of Melly dropping his head, hinting at guilt without saying it outright. The defense pushed back, calling Bortland a liar with a deal, and reminding jurors of Melly's youth, career, and lack of direct forensic ties. The courtroom was split, Melly's family in tears, while the victim's relatives looked relieved. As jurors began deliberations, experts debated whether a verdict would come quickly or drag on due to the high stakes. Experts say jurors are often swayed by raw emotion, whether they see it as guilt or remorse. Outside court, protests grew. Supporters blasted Melly's music and called for his release, while others demanded justice for sack chaser and juvie. The courthouse lawn turned into a cultural showdown covered nationwide. Inside, tension hit its peak as jurors returned with the verdict. Melly, dressed in a suit, sat stiff and unreadable as gasps and cries erupted in the room. Yet for many, the lasting image wasn't the verdict, but Melly's earlier courtroom collapse. Melly's collapse became the symbol of the entire case. For prosecutors, it looked like guilt. For the defense, it was the sting of betrayal. The clip went viral, replayed endlessly across social media, shaping how the world saw his downfall. Even after the verdict, debates raged. Was he a victim of betrayal or the author of his own fate? Either way, that image of him folding in court became iconic, forever tied to the trial's legacy. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment. Let us know what you think.